Welcome to the debate. When a child takes their own life, society usually asks what went wrong in their mind, right? We look for a psychological fracture or a hidden depression, some failure of coping mechanisms.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the normal human instinct.
But today, we are looking at a case where the child's mind was perfectly rational, and it was the universe itself that was broken. And, well, broken by her own mother.
Right. We are diving into the world of the three-body problem today. Specifically, we're examining one of the most devastating dynamics in modern science fiction. That relationship between the astrophysicist Ye Wenjie and her daughter, the string theorist Yang Dong.
It's just such a tragic dynamic.
And it really is. And the central question we are exploring today is how Ye's relationship with her daughter changes our view of her character, and ultimately who or what is actually responsible for Yang Dong's suicide.
And I just want to note, this discourse emerges directly from the source material. We will be looking closely at Ye's parenting, her secret life as the revolutionary leader of the Earth Tree Solaris organization, and those staggering revelations that immediately preceded Yang Dong's decision to end her life.
So where do you stand on this?
Well, I will be arguing that Ye was a mother who tragically failed to protect her child from a collapsing world of theory, mainly because she just did not equip her with the emotional resilience to survive it.
Okay, and I contend that Ye's secret life as an extremist made a stable family life entirely impossible. Her cosmic betrayal directly caused her daughter's death.
Let's get right into it then. To start us off, I think we need to understand the architecture of Yang Dong's mind, which was, entirely shaped by her mother.
Right.
My position is that Ye's primary failure was an incredibly deep psychological and developmental failure. It wasn't just a downstream effect of her political actions. We know from the text that Yang Dong's entire inner world was built on pure, elegant mathematical theory.
She was very insulated.
Exactly. She had this unusual sensitivity to the beauty in mathematics and music. Like, she described Bach's music as a giant, complex building being constructed bit by bit. And that is a beautiful way to view reality, but it requires the universe to make absolute, predictable sense.
I come at it from a different way, though. You are describing a child who is hypersensitive to the theoretical world, but we cannot ignore that Ye Wenjie deliberately kept her in that bubble. What do you mean by deliberately?
Ye wasn't just a passive observer of her daughter's fragility. She was actively hiding the truth of the universe from her.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because Yi herself recognizes this failure later.
Does she?
Yeah, she does. When the nanomaterials researcher, Wang Miao, visits Ye Wenjie after Yang Dong's death, Yi admits her ultimate failing. She says she exposed Yang Dong far too early to extreme, abstract ideas. She essentially raised her daughter in a pristine, sterile tower of theory.
Well, she certainly isolated her.
Right. And contrast that with Yi herself. Yi survived the horrors of the Cultural Revolution because she was adaptable. She tells Wang Miao that a woman should be like water, flowing over and around obstacles.
Right. The water metaphor. Yeah. That is a gritty, real-world survival trait. Yi possessed it, but she fundamentally failed to pass it on to her child. Yang Dong had no water in her. She was all rigid glass.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that viewing Yi merely as a flawed parent deeply obscures her role as the literal architect of her daughter's destruction?
Architect is a strong word.
But an accurate one? My position is that we cannot separate Yi the mother from Yi the commander-in-chief of a terrorist organization. The crucial evidence here isn't just about emotional resilience, it's about what Yang Dong discovered shortly before her death.
You're talking about the computer files.
Exactly. She didn't just experience a failure in her scientific research. She discovered a deeply encrypted file on her mother's computer.
The file detailing the truth behind the Trisolaron invasion?
Yes, and we need to be crystal clear about what that file meant. Yang Dong learned that her own mother not only betrayed humanity, but actively invited an alien force that deliberately destroyed the laws of physics.
It is a horrific revelation, I agree.
It's everything. Yang's secret life didn't just make a safe environment impossible. She fundamentally altered the fabric of reality. She wasn't a mother who forgot to teach resilience. She was the one who pulled the trigger on her daughter's despair.
So we are essentially looking at two different mechanisms for this tragedy then? Was the fatal blow the collapse of Yang Dong's theoretical world, or was it the devastating betrayal by the mother?
It is undeniably the betrayal, and the text gives us the physical proof of that in Yang Dong's suicide note.
The note on the birch bark.
Right. It consists of a single line written on a piece of birch bark. Physics does not exist.
Yeah.
For a long time, the public and the scientific community in the story assumed she killed herself simply because particle accelerators were producing nonsensical results. But we have to explain what was actually happening there. The Trissolarans used supercomputers called sophons to mess with fundamental particle research on Earth.
Let's make sure we unpack that for the listener, because messing with research sounds relatively benign, like a computer glitch.
Fair point. To put it in everyday terms, imagine you were trying to figure out how a clock works. You drop a gear and it falls to the floor. You drop it again, it falls to the floor. Gravity makes sense. Cause and effect makes sense.
Okay, tracking.
Now imagine you drop the gear and it floats. You drop it again and it shoots sideways at 1,000 miles an hour.
Wow.
You drop it a third time and it turns into a liquid. That is what was happening in the particle accelerators. The most brilliant minds on Earth were running experiments, and the results were completely random every single time. It meant the basic rules of the universe were a lie. Cause and effect was dead.
And for a string theorist whose entire existence relies on cause and effect, that is intellectual suffocation.
Worse than suffocation, Yang Dong realized that this utter hopelessness wasn't a natural boundary of science. It was a deliberate, targeted attack by an alien race.
Because of what she read in the file.
Exactly. And the encrypted file proved that her own mother instigated that attack. The note, "Physics does not exist," is the horrifying realization that nature is not natural anymore. Her mother broke the universe.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. While the encrypted file was undoubtedly the catalyst that initiated the final spiral, the intellectual and developmental collapse is still the core of the tragedy.
How so?
Let me offer a different way to visualize this. Earlier I mentioned a tower of glass, but let's look at it like an immune system. Yi raised Yang Dong in a sterile clean room.
Okay.
Because Yi was so traumatized by the messiness and brutality of human politics, she encouraged her daughter to retreat entirely into the clean, pathogen-free world of mathematical physics.
A clean room where the mother was secretly manufacturing the ultimate virus.
But that's the point. When you raise an immune system in a place with zero pathogens, the very first exposure to the common cold is lethal. The Trissolarian truth was a massive chaotic dose of real-world toxicity.
I mean, yes, it was toxic.
The tragedy is that Yang didn't build her daughter an emotional immune system. She never grounded her in the messy, resilient, tangible world. And we see physical evidence of Yang Dong desperately trying to find that grounding at the very end.
You mean her room?
Yes. When Wang Miao enters Yang Dong's room after her death, he doesn't find a room full of theoretical physics textbooks or sterile modern furniture. He finds a room decorated with tree bark, rough stumps, and natural materials.
It's very stark.
Her desk is literally made of 3 raw tree stumps pushed together. Why? Because abstract theory had failed her. She was making a desperate, belated attempt to ground herself in tangible nature, to find something real and solid to hold on to.
Right.
But she didn't have the psychological tools to do it because her mother had never given them to her.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are treating Ye Wenjie like a normal, albeit highly intellectual mother who just made some poor parenting choices. Like she over-indexed on academics and forgot to take her kid camping.
I'm not minimizing her trauma.
But that fundamentally misunderstands who Ye Wenjie was. She was utterly incapable of prioritizing motherhood because she was already a political instrument. An extremist who had entirely given up on humanity.
That is a very sweeping characterization of a woman who clearly showed deep, quiet affection for her child.
affection doesn't erase her capacity for absolute cold-blooded calculation. Let's look at her capacity for family life. To protect her initial secret transmission to Trisolaris, what did Ye do?
Well, the incident at the cliff.
Right. She orchestrated the murder of Base Commissar Lei Zhixing, who had discovered what she did. But to make it look like an accident, she deliberately cut the rope and murdered her own husband, Yang Weining, who was Yang Dong's father.
She believed she had to do that to protect the signal, to bring a higher moral order to Earth.
And that is the definition of fanaticism. She calculated that protecting an alien invasion was mathematically more important than her husband's life and more important than her unborn child having a father.
It was a utilitarian choice in her mind.
You compare her to someone who raised a child in a sterile, clean room. Let's be accurate about the metaphor. Yi didn't just fail to provide an immune system. She actively invited the plague, handed it the keys to the world, and locked the doors.
I think you're her as a sociopath, like she's completely devoid of maternal instinct or humanity. And the source material directly contradicts that flat, one-dimensional view. Her psyche's much more complex.
Okay, tell me how.
Let's look at her time in the remote village of Kijiatun in the Greater Kanaran Mountains.
The village she was sent to after the murders at Red Coast Base.
Correct. After she murders her husband, she goes into labor and suffers a severe hemorrhage. She is sent to this incredibly impoverished village to recover. And what happens there?
They take care of her.
The villagers, who are poor and politically marginal, donate immense amounts of blood to save her life. Dozens of peasants line up in the freezing cold. Because Yang is too weak to produce milk, the women of the village, specifically a woman named Feng, breastfeed Yang Dong. They share their extremely limited survival-level food with her.
It's a profound moment of grace from the villagers. I don't dispute that. But what does it actually change about Yang's trajectory?
It fundamentally cracks her misanthropy. We have to understand the mechanism of Yang's changing psyche here. Her entire betrayal of humanity was based on a core axiom that human beings are fundamentally selfish, inherently evil, and utterly incapable of self-correction.
Right.
But in Kijiatun, she witnesses pure, uncalculated human goodness. The text explicitly notes that this experience momentarily destabilized the certainty she had constructed.
Momentarily being the key word.
But the village didn't just save her physical life. It actively disproved her core mathematical axiom about human nature. She even realizes that if her entire life had unfolded within such a supportive community, she might never have pressed the button to contact the aliens.
That's a big if.
But it proves she possessed a deep, latent capacity for normal human connection and motherhood.
It proves she recognized human goodness far too late. The signal was already traveling through space at the speed of light. And more importantly, what does she do with this newly discovered understanding of human grace?
Well,
She literally stands in front of a crowd of rebels and shouts, "Eliminate human tyranny." That momentary softening in the village, that maternal warmth you are highlighting, it didn't stop her from leading a terrorist organization.
I know it didn't stop her.
Their stated goal was to help an alien race conquer Earth. It didn't stop her from directing an organization that drove brilliant scientists, people just like her daughter, to suicide.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Her return to the ETO doesn't negate the maternal softening. It complicates it. It shows that her actions weren't born of a cartoonish inherent evil, but of profound systematic trauma.
The trauma from the Cultural Revolution.
Yes. Her worldview was forged in the fire of the Cultural Revolution. She watched teenage Red Guards beat her father, a brilliant physicist, to death during a public struggle session.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Her own mother stood on stage and denounced him to save herself. Her younger sister enthusiastically joined the Red Guards. Later, when Yi thought she found intellectual kinship with the journalist Bai Mulin, he cowardly blamed a treasonous letter entirely on her to save his own skin. Time and time again, the people closest to her betrayed her for survival or ideology.
I don't deny her trauma for a second. The intergenerational trauma stemming from the Cultural Revolution is the engine driving this entire narrative.
Exactly.
But understanding her trauma doesn't absolve her of the absolute devastation she wreaked on her own daughter. If we want to understand who is responsible for Dong's death, we have to pivot to how Dong actually viewed her mother for most of her life, and what that means for the final betrayal.
Which was a view of deep, abiding affection. I mean, for all of Yi's extreme flaws, Dong clearly loved her. Think about Dong's position in life before the end. She was a highly successful string theorist making a substantial income.
She was doing very well.
Right. She could have bought a home in a luxury development isolated from the noise of the city. But she specifically chose to live in a simple, rough-hewn, almost Spartan apartment with her mother.
Because she saw her mother as a victim.
She saw her mother as a survivor, a quiet, gentle woman who had weathered the horrific storms of history. When Wang Mayo meets Ye Wenjie, he sees a thin, aging woman carrying groceries, calmly caring for the neighbor's children with routine warmth.
That's the facade, though.
But that is the mother Dong knew. She didn't see the commander-in-chief. She saw a woman who needed protection and care.
And that dynamic, that exact dynamic, is what elevates this from a sad psychological failure into what I would call an epistemological murder.
Epistemological murder. Explain what you mean by that.
Imagine you are Dong. You have dedicated your entire existence to the pursuit of theoretical physics, finding meaning and order in the elegance of the universe. You live with your quiet, unassuming mother, whom you view as a tragic victim of historical madness.
Okay, I'm with you.
You believe the worst thing that ever happened to your family was in the past. And then you manage to decrypt that file on her computer.
The file that outlines the Trisoloran reality in the ETO.
Exactly. In that file, you don't just discover that aliens exist, you discover that your mother, the gentle woman making you dinner, the woman who taught you to revere science, is secretly the leader of an organization trying to destroy science.
Yeah.
You realize she isn't just a victim of history. She is the greatest traitor to humanity who has ever lived. The cognitive dissonance is unimaginable.
It would shatter any concept of reality.
It goes beyond shattering reality. It makes suicide the only logical conclusion. Think about it. Her mother was a lie, her profession was a lie, the fundamental laws of the universe were a lie.
Everything she knew.
Dong's suicide wasn't an act of standard emotional despair. In a world where the laws of physics are proven to be an artificial manipulation created by her own mother, suicide was the only scientifically logical conclusion left to a string theorist. It was her final, tragic equation. The mother she loved murdered the concept of truth itself. How does anyone survive that realization?
That is a staggering way to frame it. The realization that the universe is degrading, that nature isn't natural, and that your own mother invited that degradation. Yes, it is a fatal blow.
Absolutely fatal.
But I still argue that if Yi had allowed Dong to experience a more robust, messy reality earlier in life, if she had given her that water-like adaptability, instead of letting her retreat entirely into the rigid world of mathematics, Dong might have had the tools to process even that unimaginable betrayal. Yi herself notes, her world was too simple and all she had were ethereal theories.
I hear that, but saying if she had just raised her differently minimizes the sheer cosmic scale of the betrayal. We are talking about a mother who effectively sold out the entire human race.
True.
Any scientist, any person, regardless of how well-adjusted they were, would be driven to the brink by the realization that their own parent condemned humanity to extinction. The tragedy is that Dong was one of the first humans outside the ETO who realized the despair of the situation, and she had to face it utterly alone.
Right. She couldn't tell anyone.
She couldn't turn to her mother for comfort because the one person she should have been able to trust was the architect of the nightmare.
It is a devastating isolation. And it's fascinating how perfectly this mirrors Ye Wenjie's own isolation decades earlier. Yi was isolated by the madness of the Cultural Revolution, by the betrayals of her mother, her sister, and her colleagues. She retreated into the cold, mathematical logic of contacting an alien race because human empathy had failed her.
The parallel is definitely there.
Decades later, Young Dong is isolated by the madness of the Trisoloran invasion, betrayed by her mother, and she retreats into suicide because science, which was her version of empathy and order, had failed her. The cycle of trauma just perpetuates itself, jumping from politics to physics, but always ending in destruction.
Which forces us to look at the sheer violence of ideology. Ye Wenjie allowed an abstract belief, the idea that humanity needed an external force to impose moral order, to overwrite her humanity. She sacrificed her husband, her field of study, and ultimately her daughter on the altar of that ideology.
Well, let's summarize where we stand on this remarkably layered dynamic as we are coming to the end of our time.
Sounds good.
My view remains that Ye Wenjie is a deeply tragic figure whose primary failure as a parent was psychological. Broken by the ideological fanaticism of her youth, she retreated into a cold view of the universe and fostered a fragile, theory-obsessed child who couldn't adapt to a collapsing scientific paradigm. While Yi committed horrific acts of betrayal, her experiences in Kichaton prove her humanity was never entirely extinguished. It was just buried too deep to save her daughter from a sterile, ungrounded existence.
And my summary is that viewing her primarily through the lens of psychological parenting flaws misses the true magnitude of what she did. Ye Wenjie was a radical extremist whose secret life completely compromised her family.
Right.
She made a unilateral decision to invite an alien invasion and murdered her husband to protect it. Her daughter didn't just die from a lack of emotional resilience. She died because she discovered her mother had betrayed humanity and destroyed the very concept of science. Ye directly caused her daughter's death by acting as the catalyst for the Trisoloran lockdown on physics.
Yeah, despite our different angles on exactly where the ultimate responsibility lies, I think we both find clear agreement on one foundational point. Ye's actions, her parenting, and Young Dong's death are inextricably linked to the intergenerational trauma originating from the Cultural Revolution.
Without question, the violence that killed Ye Tai in that public struggle session didn't just end his life. It sent a massive shockwave through time.
Yeah.
Ye Wenjie was a product of a campaign that sought to destroy the old world, and in response, she literally tried to bring in an alien world to overwrite human history. Yang Dong was collateral damage in that cosmic ideological war.
Reflecting on this relationship from multiple perspectives illuminates the profound, often unbearable tension within the source material. That tension between deeply personal family bonds and radical ideological commitments. When belief becomes absolute, whether it's a belief in a political revolution or a belief in the moral superiority of an alien race, the people closest to the believer are usually the ones who get crushed under the weight of it.
It forces the reader to ask terrifying questions about what we owe to our ideals versus what we owe to our children. Ye Wenjie ultimately chose her ideals.
There is so much more to explore regarding how these themes echo throughout the rest of the characters' lives, and how this shadow of Ye Wenjie continues to influence the fate of humanity long after she is gone. We will leave it to the listener to decide for themselves where the ultimate responsibility for Young Dong's tragic end lies.
We started today by talking about what happens when the universe breaks, about what a parent leaves behind.
And as we look at the ruins of Young Dong's shattered reality, we have to wonder, when a parent's legacy is built on a foundation of absolute calculated disillusionment, can the child ever inherit anything other than the shards?